The only thing I can think of is how Looney Tunes that the entire butterflies into words thing is. It reeks of 2000s era LOL so random that was popular when I was 12. Like everything else so far, the whimsy feels awkwardly forced and nothing like the source material. Hello and welcome to Comprehension Points Video Snark. If you came here because you thought that this was an audiobook, please stick around and maybe learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books and discuss what went wrong and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read through of the Wonderland Trials by Sara Ella. Not the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. Chapter 13. When they get to London, Chess tugs Alice's hand to hurry her along. She's hungry, and despite having rested on the train, she feels like she's in a lot of pain simply walking around. I'd also like to note that the narration is being quite heavy-handed with painting Chess as the love interest here. I'm serious, the author would have been less obvious if she chucked a brick at the readers' heads. Alice forces him to take a break. While they're stopped, Chess explains to her that this is apparently where the heart of Wonderland is. This is interrupted by an entire page of Alice's infuriating, wandering thoughts that add nothing to the plot and makes me wonder if literally anybody bothered to edit this at all. When the narration finally remembers to get back to the plot, Chess tries to drag Alice off, citing that they're late. Alice complains that she's tired despite, as I said, the fact that they can't have been walking for more than 5 minutes. She also complains that she's not a real wonder. Chess insists that she is, that he's somehow seen proof of her greatness. There's a super tedious back and forth that borders on actual argument over this. It's honestly not enduring. It simply makes me want to punch Alice in the face for being so whiny. He eventually asks her who discovered the Wonder Gene. She spews out some generic answer like a good little schoolgirl and cringes a little over how it makes her sound. Chess asks her what else Catherine Pillar discovered, but Alice replies that Catherine's lab was destroyed and that Catherine herself disappeared. She starts to argue that Catherine didn't have the gene, but come on. The lady who discovered it could probably find a way around the system that she literally created. Do you truly think a brilliant scientist such as Pillar would spend her life studying something she didn't have, that she didn't believe in with her entire heart and soul? She discovered the gene probably because she was doing odd things and wanted answers. And then because Alice is literally the entire meal short of a happy meal, Chess needs to spell things out for her. Pillar wasn't arrested or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The entire thing was completely and utterly staged. He then presses her for the answer of why is a raven like a writing desk. But I'd also like to add that this is the same girl who, not even 60 seconds ago, needed to have spelled out for her that Pillar acted like she didn't have the Wonder Gene and staged her own disappearance. Alice continues to not get it and only becomes increasingly frustrated with Chess's pressure, which in turn makes Chess frustrated with her. Look, if you're somehow pinning all of your hopes on this, I'd suggest, I don't know, literally any other course of action. Literally, the only reason why this story is going to work out in the end is because of Alice's plot armor. Alice randomly takes a mental step back and thinks about how everybody's hopes of finding their lost friends and family are riding on her. She tells Chess that she'll find Kit. No, he retorts, I'll find him. You don't know the first thing about family. Your sister has been arrested, and all you care about is entering the trials and fighting the parents who probably don't want you. Add in a remark about how freaking stupid Alice is, and that's basically her entire character in one sentence. Alice tries to fire back and says that Charlotte isn't her real sister, completely and utterly ignoring the literal years where Charlotte took care of Alice, fed her, clothed her, made sure that she tried to stay out of trouble, and in thanks for all of that, Alice completely and utterly dismisses Charlotte the second that it's uncovered that they probably aren't related by blood. You know, if I had any actual hope of this series turning out remotely decent, I'd say that Alice actually is Charlotte's sister. After all, literally nobody knows where Alice even came from. But I don't have that hope, so here we are. Chess calls Alice out on her nonsense and basically regurgitates everything that I said about how freaking ungrateful Alice is as payment for Charlotte having taken care of her for years and years. He vanishes, then leaving Alice to figure out how to get into Wonderland by herself. Game 2, Hearts. Not gonna lie, but if this is where the romance begins to kick off, I'm gonna start throwing things. It's also worth noting that a couple different reviews on Goodreads complained that the first 13 chapters were, well, pointless. I'm inclined to agree, and I'm also eager to actually, start the plot. Chapter 14. The chapter starts off with half a page of Alice bristling following Chess leaving her before we get a paragraph break. Why the author felt the need to include it is beyond me, but here we are. But then again, this is also coming off from what reviewers warned were the most pointless 13 chapters ever, so I don't know why I'm surprised. The author clearly loves her unnecessary padding. Despite my eagerness to actually get to the plot, the fact that we've now entered into the second act, the author is clearly in no real hurry. We jump to a flashback of when Alice was a rookie card player. I'm going to ignore the author's repeated insistences of hammering in that she knows the names of random background characters from the source material, or else I will go crazy. Alice chokes on her drink and Chess offers up a handkerchief. He's full of charm from such a simple action. I'd heard of boys like him, charming boys, smooth-talking boys, boys that were the very reason all girls' scrolls were invented. I'm no historian or anything, but I'm pretty sure that all girls' scrolls were invented because of casual sexism, the idea that women were somehow less than men and therefore they didn't deserve access to the same kind of education that men did. I don't know what's worse, the author's continued ignorance of UK history or her casual disregard for centuries worth of female oppression, but once again, I'm clearly putting way more thought into this than the author did. Anyway, so Chess showed up, asked Alice if she was a novice card player, which caused her to choke on her drink. She's wary of any kind of smooth-talking male and pointedly tells him that she doesn't mingle with the other players. She also calls him a wonder in the way that you would a racial slur. She regrets having done that since she does find them fascinating and worries that Charlotte's influence has rubbed off on her too much. He then makes her bet that she'll dance with him. When she asks by midnight tonight, he laughs and says that there's no end date on this. When Alice gets angry over the lack of closure for their little bet, he says a lot of word salad. He also calls her Ace, which prompts her to tell him what her actual name is. After that, he'd do things for her in exchange for little tidbits of personal info about her, such as her favorite color or how she took her coffee. Back in the present, Alice wanders around the park for a while and thinks about how she can never go back home. But as she's thinking of how word must have spread about how she's a wonder, she realizes something, that she was never really home anyway. Then, in a move that I can only call the precursor to Mary Sue magical guessing powers, Alice decides that since she's a wonder, then she must know how to get to Wonderland. Which doesn't make sense, which is why it is that I'm calling it magical Mary Sue guessing powers. She leaves the park and stops before a monument to Queen Victoria. A lot of people think that Queen Vicky was a wonder. This prompts Alice to think about the history lessons Charlotte had given her when they were growing up. But with some time-related clarity, Alice looks back on those lessons and is convinced that Charlotte knew that Vicky was a wonder. This makes Alice begin to question every single one of Charlotte's motives. Continue to not be mentioned is any worry Alice might have for her missing sister. Charlotte literally existed to be a plot device and nothing more. Alice decides to go back to where it all began, which I guess is the orphanage where she and Charlotte were for a while. As she's walking, she thinks about checking the GPS, but then remembers that the police are super strict in the city and won't be so quick to overlook her illegal technology. The orphanage is described as basically your standard Victorian poorhouse, despite the fact that this story is supposed to take place sometime in the distant future. How does a country reach a tipping point where they actually start going backwards as a society? Exactly what does the author think life is like in England right now? No, really, I need to know. Anyway, for the first time since discovering Charlotte's disappearance, Alice finally spares a thought for Charlotte that isn't wrapped up in Alice's own woe-is-me teenage angst. But this barely lasts for a paragraph before quickly jumping back into Alice's own struggle and how she's going to get into Wonderland. Alice is seriously the worst. She looks at the destroyed ashes of what remains of Westminster Abbey, which was destroyed by Wonder supporters. Again, with me putting too much thought into the story than the author ever did, but why is there still ash and rubble where Westminster once stood? But anyway, people destroyed it because they didn't think that it was right that Wonders should be punished without a fair trial. I have something to say about that, but none of it is relevant right now, so I will continue on. Alice thinks of how weird it is that people died simply because they were, and I quote, misunderstood. And I feel like not even the author understands half of the point that she's trying to make here. She continues on and comes across a dandelion that's growing up through the crack of the sidewalk. And then because this book wasn't tedious enough, Alice has to compare herself to the plant after she plucks it. The Foundling House, precisely where I left it 6 years ago. Like, I get that this is Alice in Wonderland and that strange things happen, but there's a weird implication here that the orphanage would have gotten up and walked away or something. Chapter 15. Alex walks around the grounds of the children's home and wonders if things have really changed that much or if she's simply misremembering things that badly. Then, because there wasn't nearly enough tragedy wank in this book, Alice thinks about the abusive cook who used to shove the misbehaving children into the cabinets and... can we not? The cook claimed that all of the children were wonders and that they should simply drown all of them in the river anyway. People who threaten to drown children should probably be locked up. These are not the kind of people that I want hanging around in society. Thanks. Anyway, despite Alice not even giving a hoot about her own sister's disappearance, I don't know why it is that I'm so surprised that Alice's memories of the abusive cook passed without even further comment. Not even a wow, she was abusive and probably should have never been allowed around children before moving on. Alice thinks briefly about the owner, whom she tries to reassure the readers was nicer than the cook. No, really, except that this is nothing more than a passing remark. And considering that this lady not only hired the cook but also kept the cook employed for at least several years, I'm not completely convinced about the owner's niceness. The narration goes on to explain about how the house seemed abandoned, and considering that this is within spitting distance of where Westminster used to be, I'm calling the author out on her nonsense. Again. Even right now, do you know how much houses in that area cost? And considering that they'd closed the borders, I can't exactly imagine that housing prices in London somehow improved. Somebody would have moved in probably minutes after the owner left. Alice walks in and starts looking around, again restating how weird it is that this place would have been unoccupied for so long, especially if this is some sort of government-funded orphanage or whatever. Much like when she's been looking around the outer property, Alice thinks that the things that looked so big when she was a child suddenly look so much different now that she's 16. She then has a random panic attack over the entire thing for no real reason except to siege into another flashback of Chess randomly telling her to change her perspective. As the book jumps back to the present, Alice wanders over to the church next door where she looks in through one of the windows. She starts to think about the impossible. And it's at this point that I'm wondering when the actual plot is going to start, because I was promised Wonderland and the only thing that I've been seeing for the past chapter and a half is navel-gazing. It's not so much that I mind books about soul searching, but the problem is that when you pick up a book called Wonderland Trials, most people are expecting, oh, I don't know, wonder? After all, this book isn't called yet another whiny, bratty 16-year-old girl working through her issues. Alice's thoughts take her back to Catherine Pillar and how she's been vilified simply for having identified the gene, despite the fact that the gene was always there, only unknown, kind of like autism or dyslexia. The narration in Alice asks like Alice's thoughts about the discovery of the Wonderland gene somehow solved some crucial plot point, but this is so incoherent and poorly written that I'm completely and utterly lost about the entire thing. And then there's somebody living inside of her head. Yeah, I've got nothing. What the is going on? After this, Alice says that since she knows wonders are real, then it must mean that Wonderland is real, therefore she believes in Wonderland. Calm down there, Descartes Jr. Anyway, after stating this, Alice disappears. Chapter 16. Alice's next thought is that she's in a beautiful garden. Butterflies literally spell out, "Welcome to Wonderland," before her eyes, and her reaction towards all of this is exactly what you think it would be. As she continues to look around, she sees this beautiful church, and the butterflies reform an explanation about how wonder brings forth all sorts of buildings, and that this is a reproduction of Westminster. The only thing I can think of is how Looney Tunes that the entire butterflies into words thing is. It reeks of 2000s era LOL so random that was popular when I was 12. Like everything else so far, the whimsy feels awkwardly forced and nothing like the source material. It's after 2 full pages of staring at cartoon butterflies, Alice finally realizes that she's literally smack dab in the middle of another city surrounded by people. How that wasn't thought number 1 is beyond me, but whatever. Looking at not Westminster was clearly the priority here. Anyway, Alice overhears a couple of people being cheap plot devices and complaining about how people are disappearing during the titular Wonderland Trials and how they should put a stop to the entire thing. As Alice listens to this plot being explained to her like she's 5, somebody bumps into her and is rude. But honestly, that's what Alice gets for standing in the middle of a path in a busy city like some country bumpkin, so I'm honestly not angry at the girl for being rude towards Alice. It's at this point that Maddie makes her first physical appearance. Her hair is purple and she's wearing a tiny hat, if this is of any actual importance. The girl who was rude to Alice, in turn, is rude to Maddie, claims that she's only famous because of her father, Maddox, and then implies that the only reason why Maddie is in the trials this year is because her brothers brought her little sister away in. Maddie doesn't seem to give a flying fig about what this rando has to say, however, but the way that this is portrayed in the narration makes Alice practically swoon over the entire thing and paint Maddie as some kind of heroic figure that should be looked up to. Maddie didn't do anything, but sure. After the rude girl storms off, apparently rather upset over not being able to push Maddie's buttons, Maddie turns to Alice. She says that she's been begging for Charlotte to bring Alice back for ages. She asks where Charlotte is, and Alice doesn't feel right to ruin Maddie's day by explaining what had happened to Charlotte. Maddie goes on and spouts some stuff about how she and Alice were once best friends, but even if Alice did forget about her time in Wonderland, it's obvious that this is from when the two of them were practically in diapers. The entire thing is weird, especially when Maddie says that Alice will remember her friendship with Maddie soon enough. The other girl then says that she and Alice are going to be on the same team. This is because Maddie's older brother, Raving, is coaching the Diamond team this year. She turns and helps Alice get checked in and says a bunch of nonsense about how to pronounce little. Alice thinks that the entire thing is a joke, but nobody else is laughing. The woman at the table says that Alice almost missed the deadline and that she's only one of 2 wildflowers who got in, which segues into her complaining about how unimaginative that non-wonders are. The lady then asks what Alice's alias is, which is basically what your player username is going to be, not your actual name. She goes on to explain about how the rude girl from earlier goes by Mouse, but her actual name is Mildred, but she likes cheese and is small, so she decided to own up to her own oddities and how other people made fun of her. She also talks about the archetype, which is the whole thing about the wonders being shapeshifters like Dana, but then narration quickly moves past this. Alice obviously picks Ace, which prompts more weird pseudo-friendship memories from Maddie over the card connection. The woman tells Alice that she's playing the Ace of Hearts. Maddie explains that they're all different cards and that Maddie herself is the Knight of Hearts. After Maddie continues on and tells Alice that the Ace position is the third after the King and Queen, I'm rolling my eyes so hard that I hurt myself. Of course Alice is in a position of power here, even without doing anything except to show up. I'll give you guys 3 guesses as to who the Team Heart leader is, and the first 2 don't count. Ugh, I have a headache. The lady gives Alice a bangle with a heart design on it. So much time is spent on how lightweight and forgettable that the bangle is, and that the technology for it was invented by Catherine Pillar. I do not care. Anyway, the bangle is to keep track of every player's progress, as you might expect. Along with the bangle is something called Wonder Vision, or WV for short. Alice can see her golden petals, which she guesses is currency, along with her lives, of which she has 4. She asks Maddie if she can see the screen, but Maddie says only if they link up, which is kind of like adding somebody to your friend list. The 2 girls do that, and Maddie says that Alice should add the other members of the team too. The only thing Alice can think about is how much info has been shoved at her, which, same. It's like the author suddenly realized that she's now 16 chapters in and not one single thing of importance has actually happened. It took this long for Alice to get to Wonderland, and now the author is panicking. As the 2 of them leave the area, they run into Chess. Chess asks like he doesn't know who Alice is, but in the same breath, Alice gets an invite to add Chess to her friend list. When she doesn't respond either way, the message fades. As Maddie drags Alice away, complaining about rubbing elbows with the enemy, Alice realizes that Chess is on Team Spade. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all of my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've read all of my main Snarks, you can find even more Snark on my Patreon. You can access it for $1 a month. Members also get early access to my main Tumblr Snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snarks so much that you want me to Snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just 1 cent per word. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you aren't following me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys. I'm going to ignore the author's